Independent and Lou here. We're going to be talking today, catching up on some things, talking about the news, some strange developments we've seen locally and nationally that concern some of our investigations, stuff we worked on in the past. How are you, Lou?
I'm doing good, Ben. X, how you doing?
Another day.
Welcome, folks. Listen to the Independent Gazette. One of the things, X, that we talked about for years, certainly with our custody for cash, and now that it's raised its ugly head again here in Northeast Pennsylvania, we're hoping to be on the forefront of that. But nothing changes, X. Nothing ever changes. What happened, especially in the courts, what happened 7 years ago is happening now. And it's going to happen 7 years from now until such time as there's some changes within the courtrooms themselves, which is going to be very difficult to see those changes because we have found, X, as you know, that they like to operate in the darkness. They don't want sunlight on what's going on in the courts, and certainly with the cameras in courtrooms, they've always talked about, we have to protect the children, we have to protect the innocent, and that's why they don't want any kind of cameras in courtrooms. But as we have pointed out over and over and over again, precedent, the famous words of all lawyers, they rely on precedent, and precedent right here in River City, i.e. Scranton, Pennsylvania, with Kids for Cash, we know that you cannot have protection for your children in the courts here in Pennsylvania. So with that all being said, if you just want to if you want a few words on cameras in courtroom, X, and then from then Ben is going to introduce, I guess, some clips from, I guess, judges or other folks that have some ideas on cameras in courtrooms. But before we do that, X, why don't you just opine for a minute on what your thoughts on cameras in courtrooms are?
Well, I mean, look, this is another one of those good for the goose, good for the gander type of moments whereby you cannot expect law enforcement agents, which of course we've always been in favor of from the beginning, who are wearing cameras, to not allow these same cameras within the courtroom. It's the ultimate, or another one of these forms of hypocrisy at the highest level, where the surveillance cameras are for the minions, they're for the frontline troops, but the generals will never know what's going on or be shown. And this is what the great thing about the internet is. Years ago they could always hide under this guise of it's too expensive. It's too expensive. Look, you can go out today and go buy a camera for your front door, so who may or may not be stealing packages on your when they come. So there is no excuse for this now, especially like data is dirt cheap. When incidents happen, it protects the police also. I mean, I can't even imagine how many times, for every time maybe a bad police officer was busted, I'm probably betting there's more times where the police officer was exonerated. I mean, this is the nature of what we have. And the one thing that we know is so many of the reasons why we are in the predicament we are is because of backroom deals, things that the public doesn't know, things that are hidden. I mean, again, how would things have been had we all seen on camera Jeffrey Epstein's first trial, the one where they allowed him to literally go to prison for he went to prison during the day and he could go home at night, or he could go home. I don't know. It was one of those things where literally he just basically showed up at prison for like 7 or 8 hours a day because he was deemed somehow this crazy permission. That what would have happened? I mean, that's the great thing about this whole Johnny Depp thing. There's a big difference between reading something about what happened at the trial and actually finding out, like, Amber Heard took a dump in Johnny Depp's bed. You know what I mean? Like, it helped in a big way because, so much of what we have when it comes to reading is a limited form of communication. How many times do people hear what people say and they look at them and they make their decisions. Now, look, it can work either way, but I'm a big believer in seeing what you would call micro emotions that get revealed. No different than a poker tell. So, not having cameras in a courtroom is a huge mistake. I can understand if something goes wrong and they want to take the lawyers into the judge's chambers. But no, this whole point of, even just take the word, shit, how do people say it? You can say it 100 different ways, and the way you say it determines the meaning. But if you read it out of context, if you're going through a transcript and then they're trying to convict you or not, well, you said this word. Well, I don't know. How did you say the word? I think that would add so much more color and context to whatever is going on, so that, again, at the end of the day, the public needs to know in a republic what is going on with their elected officials in order to make informed decisions when they go into a voting booth.
Yeah, one of the points you brought up, and then we'll let Ben cut to the clip here. You mentioned that as you're reading and hearing, it's a different form of communication. And I just want to let folks that if they all of our stories now, or a lot of the stories, Ben, as you know, we have put audio to our stories. So if you go to the independentgazette.org or buffaloheadmedia.com, the stories that we have published in the Gazette over, or some of them, over the years, and some of the stories that we published in our Visitor magazine or The Seeker are now on audio. So take advantage of that and listen to some of those clips. That's the independentgazette.org or buffaloheadmedia.com. Go ahead, Ben. Let's and maybe today that's what we'll concentrate on. X is just cameras in courtroom. We'll make a nice little short clip on our feelings on cameras in courtrooms. So go ahead, Ben. Let's see what we got.
Yeah, we have a clip here. Indiana judge shares thoughts on cameras in courtroom. One thing I want to say about X, you were saying, two examples. Jeffrey Epstein's first trial was not televised. However, Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial was, and just think of the difference between those two. How important the first one was and what terrible things might happen if people saw that with their own eyes, what went down in that courtroom. And then the TV drama, that is the other one. I mean, that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, it does. It actually does. Let's hear it.
Well, now been 3 months since the state Supreme.
Yep. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, let's also remember that, the number one form of communication in terms of spreading information now, people do not read encyclopedias. People rarely watch documentaries. People they're what they're doing is they're watching clips. Now look, for everything you could say, I probably would have loved to have watched YouTube clips or TikTok clips or whatever kind of clips of, events that took place during the Jeffrey Epstein trial, the first one. Likewise, I would love to have seen the stuff with Maxwell also, because people need to understand, look at the stuff and the arguments that they're doing for, why aren't these people being held accountable, and the excuses that come up within the law system.
It's unbelievable.
All right, so go ahead, run the clip.
Go ahead, let's run this.
Court moved to allow cameras inside Indiana courtrooms.
And we caught up with one of the Marion County judges that's leading the way. Mark Rothenberg is a judge in Marion County Superior Court with more than 20 years of experience on the bench. And he says technology in the courtroom is a learning process for everyone right now, but he argues that it benefits Hoosiers in two main ways. One, by offering transparency in the state's justice system, and two, by showing Hoosiers what Indiana courts really look like in case they ever get called for jury duty or as a witness.
Participating in the legal system isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it will help relax that situation, and again, give them more confidence in what we do with the justice system.
Under the new law, it is still up to each judge whether to allow cameras in their courtroom, and Judge Rothenberg says that he expects the law to be tweaked over time. You can catch that full story with him, with that judge, from our Samantha Johnson tonight on 13 News at 6.
Okay, so they're introducing a law in Indiana to give courts the option to mandate cameras, but this has kind of come into the public eye recently. I'm gonna share another video here. This is someone else, apparently MSNBC legal analyst. So he has a different take. Same idea, but for
Right.
some
But
reason,
before we go with, I would love to know what the legal analyst's opinion was during COVID when they were forcing people to get injected, breaking the Nuremberg Code.
So, is this the legal analyst here? This guy on Morning Joe? The guy speaking? This is the guy X that brought up what was the thing with Gary Johnson?
Oh, wait a minute. No, well, that's not the legal analyst. That was the Bricknell guy or whatever, the one that said, "What about Aleppo?"
Yeah, Aleppo. This is what it looks like.
It's him?
Well, I'm going to find out here in a minute.
All right.
It looks like him here. Go ahead.
Okay, because he's a journalist, Mike
he's
Chronicle
no legal
or
analyst
something.
at all. If he's parading around as a legal analyst, then we have. We know
Right.
what MSNBC
Yeah,
is.
he's part of the. We're going to hold you down and inject you with experimental things.
Yeah.
Even though it violates the Nuremberg Code, because you're not. Whatever their arguments are going to be. All right, great. Okay, run the clip.
gonna inject you with
Let's
legal
hear
advice.
this guy.
Ago this week, Bob Haldeman, former chief of staff to Richard M. Nixon, appeared before the Watergate Committee, led by Sam Ervin. It was nationally televised. The nation was glued to those hearings. They paid attention to those hearings each and every day, and the hearings made an incredible impact on the country politically and culturally. The question I have now for you, Glenn Kirshner, is do you think the upcoming trial of the President of the United States, the country sort of demands that it be on TV? It would be just such a wonderful educational event for people to really see the evidence put in play, the questions posed by the defense and the prosecution, and I think it would be very helpful for everyone if that occurred. Can it happen?
It can happen, Mike, and I believe it has to happen. I mean, we have to drag the federal judiciary into the present day, even if they're figuratively kicking and screaming. It's a little bit absurd that, courtrooms, criminal trials are public proceedings, and yet the limitation with respect to the public observing those proceedings is the size of the courtroom. That doesn't make any sense. I have heard that they will be broadcasting or live streaming the proceedings to other courtrooms, what we call overflow courtrooms. So maybe 100 or 150 people, 150 American citizens, who will be directly impacted by how this trial, ends up, can observe the proceedings. That makes no sense. Ultimately, it will be up to the Chief Justice Roberts, to decide whether, this is the moment in time when the rules should make some sense and they should militate in favor of transparency. When it comes to, watching what the leader of our nation did to our nation. So I sure hope, Mike, that the Chief Judge orders that these proceedings be televised.
All right, you got to stop.
Yeah, let's certainly hope. Let's certainly hope.
Hold it. Okay. Did you hear the guy talking? He literally did not say anything about Trump, and we will learn. If you listen to what he said, he basically was making it sound like he's guilty, and we all need to see that he's guilty. Did you catch that? The way he was saying that?
Yes.
He's already just setting everything up. And again, this is the you go back to journalism. There's no journalism. Everybody's a pundit. They all want to inject their opinions. Who, what, where, when, and why. That's it. You know what I mean? But then, of course, if it doesn't match up politically correct, we're going to leave out that what color was the assailant, Was it a male or a female? I mean, can you imagine getting pulled over now and like trying to describe somebody? It would be insane. But let's just go back to my other point of this is I don't even have to listen to any more of this. This is what I know. If it's going to be against one side, they're going to want the courtroom because they think it's going to help their case. And if it's a Jeffrey Epstein or some of these other things, like maybe a drug trial, about like some drug company that did some harm, they're going to say that it needs to be quiet. It's got to be one or the other. It's kind of like if you can draft.
In danger.
Absolutely. Oh no, this is different. Those are public figures, and the problem is we need to have a lot more of these non-public people in power brought into the sunlight rather than operating in secrecy within the shadows. And this is the big part about this. Wait till they come up with, are we going to have, was the Hunter Biden trial, is that all going to come out? What's going to happen with everybody else that gets associated with one particular side of the aisle? But we're back. But aren't we back to the same thing, which is men can be drafted, women can't be drafted. So let me get this straight. The men can be drafted, the women can't be drafted, but the women get to vote. Well, I don't know. Why would you do that? Well, I mean, one group can be literally taken to their deaths if need be, and the other group, they're all off. I mean, it's like looking at the Ukraine. I mean, every guy 18, I don't even know. Maybe they even lowered it to 16 to 60. Can't leave the country.
Well, that's in Russia.
Can't leave the country. Yeah. So they can't leave the Ukraine, but all the women, they can go.
Sorry.
I mean, like this.
How does this circle back to
but it's just this idea that, like, again, we're always dealing with these hypocrisies of it's okay for one, it's not okay for another. Yeah. It's if it's Trump, they're going to want that stuff out. Now, here's the flip side. If they thought it would would help Trump, okay,
they would not.
I bet you they'd say they would not want it.
Well. Yeah, and I have two quick points here, and we could almost wrap this up here pretty soon. But the thing is that it seems as though the two clips that Ben played, they're both saying that it would be good to have cameras in courtroom. Touche, I'm all for it. They should be in every courtroom. End of story. They could always use it as a black box. If you don't want it to be made public, use it as a black box because there's been way, way, way too much information that we have received over the years of total abuse within the court system. And if somebody does accuse the judge or the guardian ad litems or the lawyers or defense lawyers or prosecutors of some kind of misconduct, you could go back and look at it. What I found funny with this, and you picked it up really good, and we kind of touched on it last week. I usually, especially when I'm driving and traveling, I'm up on the road very early, and typically this was Morning Joe, MSNBC. I usually start my morning off listening to MSNBC, listening to them for an hour and seeing what they have to say. So I'm in the car, and I just wanted to bring this up. It was like really weird, and they were talking about Hunter Biden and all about the information that's coming out, and I'm saying to myself, without paying attention to I was listening to, oh my God, if MSNBC is bringing this information out, they're going to jail. By Hunter Biden and the president is going to get impeached because, they were talking about all what's happening in the hearings, and then I realized, Ben and X, I was listening to Fox News. I'm thinking, but I swear to you, if anybody really does, because I switch around when I'm driving, X, and it's like listening to alternative news sources. It is really unbelievable.
Well, but do you notice? Here's the key point: when they're giving it, do you ever see? They never say things like,
"Yes, it's very subtle." The accused,
right? But it's not just that; it's the fact that they don't say, well, like Trump said this, and this helps him. Trump said that, it hurts him. All they'll do is just pile on, like the prosecution or the defense, depending on who it is,
yep,
and agreeing with that dialogue. that narrative. You know what I'm saying? Like, and this is the thing. This is why when people get upset and they're like, well, what is it that gets everybody all riled up? It's again a two-tier justice system type of thing. And it's not just that. It's like when you find out, like, people in politics and their kids being put on boards of directors, their kids getting put on hedge funds, their kids getting jobs, working in news organizations. When somebody comes out with a book, and then, you realize they push through another book deal, but then their books somehow mysteriously get like advanced, $5 million payments for their story. It's just the insanity of how nobody in their right mind can sit here and wrap their heads around the levels. And don't get me nuts. I think back in the old days, it was just people would put stuff in a paper bag and give it to somebody. So they've just gotten a little bit more clever. Nobody's going to keep $100,000 wrapped in tinfoil in their freezer. What we'll do now is, what I'm going to do, Lou? I need you to give me $100,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some finger painting, and I want you to buy my painting that I did in an afternoon.
Right.
And,
art.
Okay.
Art. You're buying my art.
Buy my art, absolutely. Or what? And this is it.
Yeah.
And this is the part that breaks the youth of the nation. As they get older, they start to see this, and it's like, wow, there's no Santa Claus. You lied to me. Yeah. There's no Easter Bunny. You lied to me. Yeah. There's no, and then they start realizing,
there's
holy moly,
there's no justice. You lied to
me. And there are those moments where you do think justice is being served. And the crazy part about it is everybody gets excited as if like a sports team has won, because in a weird way, there's a part of them that in the back of their mind is always thinking like, yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
it's not going to be upheld.
It has,
Yep,
it has become a sporting event, politics. So anyway, just finish up. What's your final thoughts on cameras and courtrooms? And I'll say the same.
No, I mean, look, let's take a record of every person that says they're in favor of it now that it's Donald Trump. And of course, let me just throw out, I'm not Donald Trump big supporter, right? But let's go back and let's apply this equally to every example, because I'm very sure that if we go back, a lot of these people now are backtracking on stuff that they said now that it flipped. Remember, just remember, before, when Trump won the election in 2016, there were so many people saying he cheated.
Right.
That the Dominion voting machines were hackable. I think it's like Senator Wyden from, and I forgot, there were like two other ones signed on a paper literally saying you cannot trust the Dominion software.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So basically, what we're saying is let's get people on record about the cameras and courtrooms, and let's stick with it and end the story. And,
absolutely.
And I'm glad people are starting to get on board. What's your last thoughts there, Ben? Anything?
I just want to point out how, like you and X said, they're just coming up with that now. They could have said it 1,000 times every year, 1,000 times a day.
Yep.
Never said it until now, and let's see if they switch up.
And let's just see where we switch. And so the final word here from the Gazette: custody for cash, kids for cash, all the things that have happened here in Northeast Pennsylvania, and certainly opened our eyes as time went on. Is we've been calling for cameras in courtroom for a long time. It's the only way to have true transparency and how justice is administered in the United States and in your own backyard. So until next week, thanks for joining us. IndependentGazette.org. Check us out, and we'll see you guys next week.